Okay, so here we go. So welcome to Fenrock's simple audio setup. Simple is a relative term, so let's get into it. What we are going to do is go through the bits of software that we need. There is vbaudio.com is the main place to go for the software that we're going to use. The particular pieces are VoiceMeeter Potato, which is the latest version of their software. You'll see lots and lots of references to VoiceMeeter Banana, but Potato is the latest version that we're going to use. It looks complicated, but we're going to break it down into quite easy. And we're also going to install this VB cable, which is a virtual audio device. It basically allows you to send things into one end of a cable and it comes out of another in a virtual way, and it's incredibly useful. The second thing you're going to need is the LoudMax VST. This is going to be our main compressor for the music channel that we're going to set up in this demo, and that's going to allow us to have any loudness that comes through, and it'll just compress it down so that it doesn't go above a certain amount, and we can make it so that it's basically limited. A third piece of software is Cantabile. This is a piece of software that allows us to plug all VSTs together and all our inputs and outputs. This is the old look. We'll see it's a lot easier looking than that. VLC, that's going to be our source of music in this particular demo. One other thing that is worth getting is some more VST plugins, so when you're not just doing the music channel, you could do Discord and microphone and do all kinds of other things as well. The Reaper plugins are extremely good for that. They give you a really simple compressor. We've got some delay, EQ. This one is dynamics processing. This is incredible for removing hiss off your voice. So you can get the background noises and various other things. This is a gate. This actually allows you to stream. There's some JavaScript ones, and there's all kinds of plugins here. We're not going to go into the massive details of this one, but they will be useful if you want to do other things later. I also wanted to mention that this guy here, Mr. Untitled, has done a tutorial which is almost identical to what I'm talking about and takes it through into individual pieces. He's got a video which I haven't looked at yet. It's probably going to be way better than mine, but here we go anyway. So you have to install all these bits of software, VB cable, VoiceMeeter Potato, and the LoudMax plugin. And now VST plugins tend to go into one of two directories. Mine go into the program files Steinberg VST plugins directory, but there are various locations that you can install them into, so it's your standard VST folder. So once you've done that and rebooted, then it's on to the next part. So presuming you've done that and come back, the first thing you can do is fire up VoiceMeeter itself. VoiceMeeter comes with an interface like this. It looks quite complex, but there's a repetition everywhere. Effectively, we have 5 input channels. We're going to just deal with the microphone and a music channel for this as 2 hardware inputs. And then we are going to use a hardware output. There are 5 hardware outputs. We are going to default our hardware output to our headphones, which is, in my case, I've got a Scarlett 6i6, which is a Focusrite USB device, so that's my main output. That's where all my headphone stuff comes out. And then these are all the this is the master section where all of these letters here point to. You can see A1, A2, A3, and that allows us to do various controls on the channels, but we'll talk about those later as well. So the first thing we want to do is set up. If you right click on the tops here, you get you can input the name. So for number 1, I'm going to call it the mic, and for number 2, right clicking there, I'm going to call it music. If I could type. You can select your input device by left clicking there, and for this I'm just going to choose my main Focusrite USB. That's my microphone, and for the music output, and immediately you can start to see that my voice is coming through. It's only on one channel, it's only on the left channel because it's a single input, so we'll see how that changes in a bit. If I wanted to listen to that now, just to complete how this works, because this is my headphones, that's A1. What I can do is I can send this input that's in here to various channels, and these are all the different channels. So A1 to A5 are the hardware channels. So if I want my microphone to appear in my headphones now, I click this, and it is, but you can't hear it because I'm not routing that through to the video. But you can see that this A1 line is just lit up as well. So if I unclick that, this line disappears because it's no longer being sent to this channel. Similarly, if I sent it to A2, it would appear here, A3, and you can have as many combinations of these as you want. So you can have various inputs like your music be sent to just your headphones, or your headphones and your stream, and various other ways of doing it. So that's music. The second thing I'm going to do, we're going to use that virtual cable that we had installed, and that is going to be the destination that your music software sends its sounds to. So if I choose cable output here, so anybody who sends to the cable input will appear at the cable output because it's just a virtual pipe. So somebody sends it to the input, we will see it coming out on the output side. So if I go into VLC here, we can very quickly see that in audio device, cable input, I'm sending it to the input channel there, and if I start Classic FM up, we'll see that that comes through, and it comes through on my headphones. In fact, if we bear with me a second, if I add an audio capture here, okay, add my focus right, okay, and send that to my
in the
headphones.
theme from Schindler's
So we can
List,
actually
John
hear that
Williams
on the channel now,
conducting
because
the
I've just added that
Pittsburgh
to my
Symphony
OBS
Orchestra
output,
there,
so it comes into
and the
stream.
score achieving its highest ever place on our countdown.
So we can see here,
it's,
one of the things we can do is
number 28.
that can get really
Now,
loud.
don't go anywhere, will you? Or you'll miss, quite possibly, the
What
definitive
we want to do in this
performance
demo
of
is
Tchaikovsky's
to
Piano Concerto
limit
number 1,
this
coming
so it
up
doesn't come
after
through
Classic
too loud
FM's
if
4
we've got
o'clock
multiple
news.
different songs.
The
going
Classic
through.
FM Hall of Fame
That's the
with
trick, yeah.
Viking. The
So that goes through. I'm going to
award-winning
take that off my headphones because it's annoying, but we can see that that's come through, and I can very quickly send that to my headphones, and you could hear that come through on the channel as well. So somebody sends to cable input and we send to there. That's great, but and that's pretty much all you need to do. We can send that to different channels now, and this different channel can be picked up. This one is called B1, and it is the where are we? That would appear as VoiceMeeter output, brackets VB audio, VoiceMeeter VIO, and I can give an example of that where if we move across to OBS here, what we can do is we can add an audio, an input, audio input capture. We're going to add a source, and we're going to add a new source of the VoiceMeeter output. So we'll talk about why it's called outputs and inputs in a minute, but effectively if I add that, we can now see that on this OBS we're getting that feed, and that's because this music channel here is being sent to B1, and B1, as I've made in these notes here, is the VoiceMeeter output VB audio VoiceMeeter VIO. So anybody who uses that as their input channel or as their recording device, then they will get that sound. So we could route many different inputs here into that. So I can so right now actually my voice is going into there as well because I'm sending that to B1, so my voice would be coming out on that, on the input channel there as well. So that's how routing works. Fairly simple. The next thing we want to do is to do patching. Patching allows us to send the input as it comes through here. Before it actually goes out to these channels, we can change it in some external software. So we add compression, EQ, we can add some voice filters, we can do anything we want. We could add soundboards as inputs and various other things. So the way that we do that is we go into system settings on the Potato menu, and one thing to notice on here is we should check that all of these values are the same. It's quite important that we have the same frequency being used. Now my Scarlett accepts 48k hertz quite easily, and so I use that across the board. If you've got different values here, it's worth changing those, and the way that you do that is you go into the main sound settings, into your playback and recording devices, and you go down to the appropriate one for these and double click there, go into advanced and make sure that's set at 16-bit 48k. Now if yours says 16-bit 44.1k, which is CD quality across the board, that's fine, that's your own choice, but as long as they're all the same, 44.1 or 48k, there isn't a huge amount of difference between them, but they have to be the same across the board. Right, then now as regard patching, what we need to do is to enable the lower section here. So we are going to be dealing with channels 1 and 2 here, so in 1 and in 2. So if we enable all 4 of those, what we will see, what that should do is zero these out because they're being patched, but it looks like my patcher must already be open. No, it's not. Right, so if I enable that, there we go. So now what's happened is we go to our patcher, and that's Cantabile, or however it's pronounced. I've never worked it out yet. And now Cantabile, you can see I've already got a minimal setup here. I've got a music channel and a microphone channel. That's microphone mono, and I've got 2 output channels. And we can see in our monitors that we've got some microphone mono, that's the input, music input, we've got the music coming in still, that's from our VLC is still playing here, but there's nothing on the output channel, and that's because nothing is connecting these two together. The very simplest thing you can do is just attach these together, and you'll see that these two both come to life. Also you'll notice that because I connected a mono microphone to a stereo microphone over here, which I'll show you in a second, that's effectively put the mono into a paired channel, into a stereo. The music channel is going straight across as well. The way that Cantabile is set up is, and this is going to crash, always does after this, unless I cancel, we have the audio driver. That's the first thing to set. When you set up Cantabile, the first thing that you have to do is make sure that the audio driver is the Potato Insert Virtual ASIO. That's the one that allows you to connect in to the patcher. I've also got an old version here, and it wasn't working earlier, and I couldn't work out why, and that's because I'd got the wrong driver here. They've created a new one called Potato Insert, so that you can see it. Then the audio ports, these mic monos, etc., are defined in the audio ports. I created these earlier. I just give them a name, mic mono. That's a single input channel. You can add new channels here, stereo inputs or mono inputs there. And we have on the left hand side of the ins, so I've got in music, that's a stereo. And these names here that you see down this side just correspond simply to the names that VB Potato is exporting. So the software automatically picks them up because it's part of that audio driver. So if I was to add one for a third port here, say Discord, let's create a new let's create a new stereo input. We'll call it Discord. I'm not going to go through this fully because it's incredibly slow and boring. And so on Discord we need to assign it, and we add an assigned channel. Now it's not in 1 left, it's that's in 1, that's in 2, and that's in 3. So if we were to choose this one as our Discord channel, then it's in 3 left and in 3 right would go in the other one. Add in 3 right there. Now confusingly, or at least it was for me, the output channels are called in 1 left and in 1 right. That's purely down to VoiceMeeter Potato just calling them in 1. So it goes in one side and it comes to the out, but they're named the same thing, even though they're actually one's an input and one's an output port. So ignore the fact it still says in 1 left. As long as it's on the output channel, that will be correct. So we've got in music that has a left and a right, number 2 because we're on channel 2 over here, and out music left and right is in 2 and left 2 again because of that and because of the names in the patches. Let's go ahead and remove that, we don't need it for now. And so here we go, we've got a microphone simply connecting straight through and no effects on it, and then we've got the music going straight through and no effects on it. Now this is where we can start to actually add effects here. We can add a plugin. When you set up Cantabile, you have to tell it where all your folders are for your plugins, and that's also in Tools Options. That will be in not file locations but plugin options. So in the plugin options, VST plugins, you tell it where your main VST plugins are. So that will be the directory where you installed LoudMax plugin into. We always get that if we change that value. I just have to reset. If you do get that error, I found that all you've got to do is cycle this twice until you get the on back on, and you start seeing inputs coming through on that. So there we go. So what we're going to do is add a plugin. So we're going to add that LoudMax plugin, which is here. All of these nicely tell you where they're located from. We add that plugin. Now you can move this around and rename it. I'm going to call it LM. Where's the rename? I've gone blind there at the bottom. I'm going to call it LM Music, just so I know what it's called. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug one end into that. I'm actually going to delete that one, and then I'm going to move that out to there. Now we've got our music back again, but this time it's going through this VST plugin. If we double click this, we get the VST plugins interface, yep, that's so music in, music out. If I move these down, this is the threshold and the outputs. So what we can see here, we can adjust these. So roughly a good set of settings is that we start our threshold at somewhat off the bottom, and then we set a threshold at say -15. What the threshold does, what the output here does is sets the maximum that the sound can ever be. So if we go back to our, if we go back here, we can see that we can turn this up, but even though we've hit the maximum now, it's not going over this value anymore, because it's being limited down to that point. So no music can come over -15 decibels. So if you've got some really loud music coming in, it will be clipped down to this, or rather than being clipped, it's just compressed. But the compression doesn't start until -24, so we won't get it'll be nice and even in this range, but as soon as it starts to go between these two ranges, that's where the compressor kicks in and will limit it. And you can play around with these values so that you get some really decent compression on this, and you can move this. You can have a listen in the background as well whilst you're doing this to see what effect that is having on the music. so that I don't blast my own ears when I listen to this again. I'm going to do that. And you can see that even though this is quite a low output, we're actually thresholding back up to there. So that's the plugin. That then will come into here and will be compressed. And then because we're sending that to our output stream, we'll be able to see that if we move across to OBS, the OBS input capture, which is our music, is limited to a range. We've got various ways also of controlling the max sound here, so even though that's compressed, we can also reduce that down in here if we want to. Alternatively, we can go back to VirtualMeet VM Potato here and drag this down so that it reduces it, and you'll be able to see that that's actually decreased the volume here as well. So you can either do it here or in Potato itself. I tend to do it here if I need to, and you can boost and bury on that side. Anyway, that is most of what I wanted to say and how to set it up. The configurations are fairly simple once you've got all the softwares in there. There's a few things to note that I've written down. If you do download cable A and cable B, you have to pay €5 for them, but I find them useful having 2 additional patches, so I have got them myself. This particular one's free, and as you can see in the setup I've done, we didn't need A and B, but I find it useful because I send Discord into A and music into B, for instance, and that frees up another one for me to be able to use for other sources. But what we get with the VoiceMeeter is these 3 channels: VoiceMeeter output, VoiceMeeter AUX output, and VoiceMeeter VIO 3 output. Those actually correspond to these B1, B2 and B3. There is a one-to-one relationship here, so if you send anything to B1, it will appear at VoiceMeeter output, the name of the device, in as I showed earlier in OBS itself. When we were doing this capture, we can see that the VoiceMeeter output VB VoiceMeeter VIO. So what I can do here is if I change that to 3, I know that audio capture is going to disappear, but if I jump back to my software over here, if I send the music to B3 now and then jump back to OBS, we'll see that the capture is starting to happen again, because those 3 devices are B1, B2, B3 are the 3 that are mentioned that you can find as inputs. They're virtual inputs. So that isn't documented very well, I don't think, and I think the naming convention leaves something to be decided. It's VoiceMeeter output, then AUX output, and then VIO output 1, 2, 3. As long as you remember that, it's actually quite easy to use. An alternative setup. So how long have we going? 23 minutes. All right, I'll try and tie this up pretty quickly. An alternative setup is to send it to one of your virtual cables. So what you can do instead, let's say on A5 here, I'm going to designate A5 as my as cable input B for whatever reason. So I've chosen that anything that is sent to hardware A5 will appear in cable B. That means because I'm sending it to cable B input, any application that chooses an output device like a speaker device, a playback device of cable B output, that's right, or cable B input, will see we'll get that flow. So instead of it being a virtual input device, we're sending it to a virtual output device, and that virtual output device is then going to be used as a kind of a speaker. So that's an alternative way of setting it up in OBS. So for instance, if I turn both of these channels off now and go back over to OBS, we can see that there is nothing coming through on this capture. even though there is music still being played through the channel. But if I send it to A5, we can see that A5 has now got the music being sent to it. So if I come across to OBS, I can now add an output device, not an input device, because this is one of the hardware output devices. I can now add an audio output capture, add a source, we'll call it A5, and I'll call it A5 cable B in this case, and I'll add a new source just so that we can remember. Yeah, cable 5 input, sorry. Inputs are outputs and outputs are inputs, and we can now see that that cable B, which we have sent the sound data to, is now being sent to OBS as well. So we have two ways here of, you can either send it to a virtual input and it appears like a microphone, or we capture the output of it that was sent to a virtual output device. They're just two ways of doing the same thing. Let's call that one was our B1 output. That was B1 output, and this was A5 cable B. So coming back across, if I turn B1 on again here, B1 output.
Are you still recording?
And that's basically it, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much.